Good morning, everyone. I'm thankful this rain isn't snow. None of us would be here. 2 weeks ago, I felt a lump on my neck near my collarbone, and I wondered what it was. It hurt a little bit, and it got bigger, and I decided I better make an appointment with my doctor. And she looked and she felt it, and she ordered a biopsy. And the biopsy showed that it was a solid mass. It was a lymph node. And they sent me to the Women's Breast Care Center for a biopsy. They told me I needed to prepare myself that it might be breast cancer which had traveled to a lymph node. And suddenly, the busy Christmas preparations and the winter season and the holiday feeling in the air took on a crystal clear significance. What if this Christmas was my last? But I had more sermons to give, more time I needed to spend with my daughters. The first wedding in our family this spring. My little health scare had a happy ending, as the biopsy showed nothing but an infection, easily treated. But life suddenly seemed so precious. Friendships seemed so beautiful. Family so treasured. Life has a way of waking you up, of shaking you, of taking you by the throat in this case, until you are grateful again for the little things, the simple things, the precious gift of each day. Last week, I was sorting Christmas decorations bought at a yard sale. And I intended on decorating my antique booth with them. But I noticed all of a sudden that several of the decorations had names inscribed on them. And so I really started paying attention, and I looked carefully. Many of those names inscribed in black ink was the name John. And I found a plastic baby ornament with his birth date. And then John's first bicycle, a stack of wooden blocks celebrating his first day of school. There were a couple of hand-painted ornaments with his black and white school pictures pasted on them. The years rolled on with a paper scroll signifying his graduation from college. And then the black ink changed to gold paint, as this tradition was handed from the mother to the wife. And there was an ornament celebrating John and Catherine's wedding. The fine gold paint faithfully recorded John's first son and several ornaments from foreign countries as the couple traveled. An angel from Venice, a handcrafted nativity from Italy, a Swiss bell ringer in Lederhosen, a gray goose wearing a red Canadian Mountie uniform. There was an ornament for John's 25th wedding anniversary and the birth of his first grandson. The grandchildren multiplied, and the last ornament that I found was a hand-carved wooden cane with a sprig of holly. And painted down its side in gold was the phrase, "In loving memory of John." And I thought, he must have been a very special man for the two women who knew him best to carry on this tradition that lasted even beyond his time on this earth. Love is expressed in many ways, and love lasts beyond death. This holiday season can be hard when money is tight, when life seems insecure. I think I must have been about 11, a skinny, shy girl. And although I didn't know it then, it would be the last Christmas that my family celebrated before joining a strict church that forbade the pagan holiday. We were so poor that we lived in a house given to us rent-free by a friend. And I was so worried as Christmas approached. I knew we didn't have any extra money. And by Christmas Eve, we had a plain tree, but no presents. My older sister and my mother left the house late that night for a trip to the grocery store. And I was just panicked at this point, thinking of my younger brothers and my sister waking up to nothing but Christmas breakfast. And so I set to work. My father had done a job recently, and he had a bunch of flat blocks that he had sawed off the ends of 2x4s. I don't even remember what he built. But I took all those flat blocks and I sanded them carefully until they were smooth. And then I took the Christmas cards we'd received that year and I cut out pretty pictures and pasted them on the blocks. I used a little glitter to give them some sparkle. And we didn't have any wrapping paper. So I tied them with ribbon and little name tags, one for each member of my family. I went to bed before my mom and my sister got home that night. And when I woke up the next morning, there was, in addition to the blocks, one present wrapped for each of us. My father had received a small payment for the job done just the day before Christmas. And my mother was able to buy presents. But she gave me a big hug for remembering everyone. And what I really remember with fondness is that months afterward, those blocks were still on everyone's dresser or nightstand. Christmas can be very small. It doesn't need to be extravagant. But the most necessary thing is love. Everything done in love. That is what matters. When we talk about small things, I'm reminded of something I recently learned, that the Grimm's fairy tales are some of our earliest recorded stories that came largely from women. Women were not allowed to publish in those days. When they began to start writing, they would often take a man's name so that someone would read the book. And I remembered how when my children were little, I used to tell them stories that I hoped would counterbalance what they were hearing at my old church. Stories to encourage their voice, to believe that we can make a difference no matter how small we are. And so a couple weeks ago, I wrote another story for my daughters, very reminiscent of what I would have told them when they were little. The mouse lived its life in the shadows, the corners, the edges. He was viewed as unwanted, unclean, a frightful sight. And yet he was a curious little fellow, and he watched with interest the family he lived with as he found the stray crumbs that no one else wanted. In the house in which he hid lived a little girl. He watched as she slept, curled into a ball, for her blanket was too thin, and she was often cold. He did the only thing that he could, which was to quietly and gently snuggle next to her cheek, his soft brown fur warming what he could. She never let on that she noticed, lost in dreamland, but her body grew more relaxed, and the mouse knew that he had made a difference. The next morning, the household was in an uproar. Everyone washing and dressing as best they could in their worn clothing. The mouse wondered what was happening, and he crept quietly behind the family as they walked down the cobbled street on their way to the old city center. The mouse watched as crowds lined the streets, shouting and cheering. A huge, elaborate royal carriage passed by, its heavy wheels rumbling in the mouse's ears. He saw the king's thick robes of fur, the gold chains and jewels around his neck, the braided manes of the finest horses drawing the carriage. And with confusion, the mouse looked from this fantastic sight to the girl he loved, standing shivering with her small boots in the snow. Something cracked in the mouse. He felt it, the pieces shattering, his quiet, hiding nature crumbling, his chest heaving, his heart pounding. Without thinking, without warning, he shouted. In that land of inequality, for some magical reason, even mice can speak. He shouted, "The king may have clothes, but his people do not." The crowd fell ominously quiet, and people looked around in fear to see who had dared to say such a thing. No one thought to look down on the cobblestones except for the little girl who had noticed her cheek warmed every night. She thought quickly. She was afraid someone would see the helpless mouse, and desperate to distract attention, she shouted, for in this land of inequality, even children have voices. She shouted, "He is right." The crowd gasped and looked at the girl in wonder. They glanced from the rich robes of the king to the thin coat of the girl, and a low rumbling started. Like ripples on a lake, it grew and grew. The mouse smiled, for although they did not know it, a new day had dawned. I'm going to close with a holiday season prayer for Christmas Eve. Bless the little ones, too excited to sleep tonight. Bless the cooks who will rise early to bake. Bless the parents putting batteries into toys and putting bikes together tonight. Bless the ones who wait at the hospital for a visit from a friend. Bless the lonely and the elderly and the sick. Bless the ones far from home, serving our country in thousands of ways. Bless the uncles and the aunts and the cousins who bring Christmas to Grandpa and Grandma. Bless the hungry, and may every child have a gift, no matter how small. Bless the empty homes where children will not return. Bless the families who remember loved ones lost with love and a lump in their throat. Bless us all this holiday season. Blessed be. And as with our time of this time that we share together, if there are comments from anyone, please share with us.